All right, hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Indie Diarist podcast, showing the human stories behind indie game development. This is Anthony Wolf, your loyal Indie Diarist and host, and writer, narrative designer, well, game designer now, because I published a little game on itch for the Brackeys Game Jam 2024.2. So I suppose I'm one of you guys now. That's what I meant to say. But anyway, so this episode is a special one to me. It's with Meaning Machine, the guys that I met at WASD this year, and I played their game Dead Meat. Well, the demo to their game Dead Meat, and it's just such an amazing use of AI in a creative way, and that is one of the topics that we're going to touch upon during this episode, something that is really dear to me. So how AI can work with us and not against us in a way that doesn't take away all the humanity from creative works. And you'll hear more about my stance on AI during the course of this episode. But before we go forward, I want to shout out to Zucchini, Fishpan Dev, and Peleg, my amazing patrons who support me every single month. Thank you, guys. If you too want to support the show, listeners, you can go to patreon.com/theindiediarist and check out all the tiers that start from as little as £1.25 per month. But now, without further ado, let's get into Indie Diary number 54 with Meaning Machine. Hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Indie Diarist podcast, showing the human stories behind indie game development. This is your loyal Indie Diarist and host, Anthony Wolf, and with me today are Tom and Ben from Meaning Machine. Two developers, well, one of them I met at WASD this year, and they're working on a very special game called Dead Meat. If I remember right, yeah, it's Dead Meat. But I don't want to say too much about it or what you guys are doing and about yourselves, so I'll hand it over to you. So please, guys, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, about what you do, where you're based, and what you're working on right now, precisely what Dead Meat is. So I'll let you sort out the order in which you want to introduce yourselves. Yes.
Shall I go first, Ben?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I'm Tom. I'm the creative director on Dead Meat. Dead Meat is a murder mystery interrogation game where you can ask the suspects absolutely anything. So, you can interrogate them, you can seduce them, you can trick them, you can, take any line of questioning. And the beauty of the game is that it rewards creative strategies that the player brings and tries to get to the truth of a murder case.
And hi, I'm Ben. I'm the tech director at Meaning Machine and steering the technology behind Dead Meat as well. Excited to be here and discuss, how we're innovating in this game, what's exciting us, what's exciting the players that are playing the game, and just diving a little bit more into the process and where we're trying to get to.
Yeah, and there's actually something really innovative about this game that I loved from the start, from when I heard it. And I even spent some time discussing with one of your developers. I don't remember his name, but we talked about the technology behind Dead Meat. But we'll get there, and we'll get there towards the midpoint of this episode. For now, what I like to do at the beginning of these episodes is always try to break the ice a little bit. And to do that, I want to ask you a little fun question. If you guys could be any game's character for one day, who would you be and why?
I'd probably. I mean, it's hard to say, but weirdly, the person that always pops into my mind is Ryo from Shenmue, or Dio from Shenmue, which is such an old school reference. But it probably is like the first character that I properly fell in love with when I was playing games, not as a child, but more as like coming into teenagerhood stage, and it felt like just a really deep, interesting character that I thought was really cool. I wanted a leather jacket like that. I wanted to wear the outfit, the sort of like 1980s look. But also, like, I think it was just, it's something about he has a very interrogative nature, and it's like always asking the questions, always trying to like get to the truth of what's going on, and maybe that's something I try and channel in my life. Never stop asking questions in both the best, like, useful ways, but also maybe quite annoying, cringe ways as well.
I'd go. This won't surprise you, Tom. I'd probably go for Indiana Jones.
All right.
But
Okay.
there's obviously modern reference to Indiana Jones in video games, but
Yeah.
my love of indie games starts out with the point and click games, where you're the adventurer, but you're
Uh-huh.
also exploring all these amazing locations. You're getting to know people. You're solving mysteries,
Yeah.
solving puzzles. But yeah, equally really excited about the upcoming indie game as well.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about that one too. It looks very interesting and also very fun. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I don't think I've ever played an Indiana Jones game apart from Lego Indiana Jones at some point. But I hear that like the originals, like one of the very first ones were pretty cool, like the point and click ones.
Definitely.
So yeah,
I
You
yeah,
know,
gonna have to.
you've got the writing talent of LucasArts at the time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Hmm.
They're just very great games
Yeah.
from that era for sure.
So the context to know about Ben is that Ben is a point and click person. Like that.
Great, because I love point and click adventures too. I mean, I love a lot of genres,
His
but point and click is. Well, what if I told you, Ben, that I just last year I started catching up with Monkey Island? I'd never played it before. So,
Oh wow!
so yeah, I got to Monkey Island 2. Then I started Monkey Island 3, but I didn't continue. I'll go back into it. But yeah, no, that's such a classic. I loved it. Still holds up really well. Um, Right. Well, then, the ice is broken. I suppose. I always there's an interesting thing. Like maybe this is a question that I will start introducing into these icebreakers because yesterday on my Discord server it was I think National Video Games Day or something like that. And one of my members asked, "What is a video game that changed your life or that had a huge impact on your life?" And I think
Right.
that could be an interesting question to answer, but also a very difficult one. In my case, it would be To the Moon, but that makes me think that maybe I wouldn't mind being Neil from To the Moon, who just goes into people's memories and, well, he's funny, but also he helps people just fulfill their deepest dreams on their deathbed, which is a really sweet and noble thing to do. But yeah, so well, moving on. I think we can start talking about like how you guys got into game development. But before then, there's always a time when you start playing games, I suppose. So I'm curious about that actually. So when you think about your earliest video game, like your earliest memories that have to do with video games, what comes to mind?
Um, I mean, from my point of view, it's probably sort of we started playing games as a sort of family, actually.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, like point and click are the kind of games, they're obviously narrative heavy, they're adventures, you can pick them up, put them down.
Mm-hmm.
But also, then they became more social for me. So I was playing like real-time strategy games, Command and Conquer Red Alert, those kinds of series.
Okay.
They were the early experiences. I kind of dipped my toe into consoles, but consoles for me never really, struck a chord.
Mm-hmm.
Had one of the original Master Systems and one of the original Nintendos and stuff. But they were great fun for a short period, but I could never get deep into those games.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my beginning anyway.
Okay.
I had a weird one because for me, video games at home were like kind of a dirty word. Like my parents really didn't think they were good for you, did not want them around, didn't want them in the house. So we were, instead of getting a PC when we were young, we had a Mac, which obviously now seems very mainstream. But back in the day, having a Mac wasn't a particularly mainstream choice, and there were no video games. Well, there were some, but it was very limited. And I remember we bought this educational game, and me and my brother worked out that if you click the buttons really really quickly, you could make the whole thing work anyway, and you could like basically win the game by by pressing the buttons really really quickly. And it was actually ended up being quite fun. And I remember my parents being like, "If you keep doing that, we'll take the game away." And I was like, "What? I'm having fun, and now it's being taken away from me. It's absolutely rubbish." But yeah, I mean, so one of the benefits of that kind of context is that games have always felt quite punk to me. They've always felt like quite rebellious and like screw the system, man. Like I hate you, mum and dad. Like so that sort of maybe frame my whole perspective on what game design is, which is sort of a much more like a rebellious activity. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, we'll get to that, and I'm really interested to hear about that. But yeah, no, that's interesting, and I think in a lot of houses after video games where kind of the work of the devil. In mine, they kind of weren't, but also they were, depending on the day and general mood. But I also had a Mac in my childhood. But that's because my dad is and was a photographer at the time already, and so he would just use the Mac to do just all the wedding albums and whatnot. So he would use Photoshop already back in the day in the 90s, and that was really cool to watch and to just sit next to him and see what he was doing. But that also meant that I had no games. So actually, I went to the console route myself. So I got a PlayStation shortly after it came out, then the PS2, and I did PlayStations all the way until now. I'm skipping PS5, I think, at this point, because I haven't got it yet. But I now have a PC, so I kind of moved to that. That does mean I skipped all the Nintendo era, but that's for another day, I suppose. So yeah, I mean, point and clicks from you and educational games from you, Tom. But like, what other games do you remember playing growing up? And like, do you think that they're influencing the kind of work that you're doing right now? Especially interested in that concept that you said about game design being a rebellious activity, Tom. So yeah, we'll start dipping our toes into that.
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to think of all the games I played when I was younger. I mean, I remember, I eventually, I think my parents sort of capitulated in sort of 2001 or something, or I don't know, whatever it was, and I got a Dreamcast,
Okay.
which is a strange
Good.
console to get because obviously, again, it's one of those things where like I went from a Mac which had no games to a console which had very few games.
Well, at least it was an improvement, though.
Yeah, but I did love, I think I think I really was really interested in again. I think it sort of framed the sense of like always accidentally being on the outside of the mainstream of gaming. It's like I'd get the Dreamcast magazine, and all my friends were like, "Dreamcast magazine, you loser! I'm playing PlayStation." I'm like, oh, you've never played Tekken? I'm like playing Soul Calibur, whatever. And so like I was always accidentally outside mainstream games, like just totally by accident. And so all my references no one else got. So I'd say Shenmue, and people like don't know what Shenmue is. I'm playing Metal Gear Solid, and I'd be like, okay,
okay, well.
So maybe that did set up a sort of a premise. I mean, of like games being like on the outside or a bit more fringe, perhaps. Being interested in like the unheard of games, and actually there being a bit of social, like a sort of social, cultural capital maybe around knowing games that other people don't know, and like, oh, you don't know this and you don't know that, and like, oh yeah,
yeah,
sure.
no, it's true. Yeah. I see that. It's not that I see that. It was like that at school and all that stuff. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think picking up on a couple of terms Tom's used there, both social and console, like games change as you sort of go through life journey, or certainly for me. So university, post-university, early job, and I could both afford consoles, and also it was more of a social, casual thing to play games. Like you'd pick up Tekken with a beer, and play that for 4 hours of a Thursday night or whatever as a student. I also had a Dreamcast. Crazy Taxi was an amazing game. Moving a little bit more into like PS3, PS4. Yeah, I think I played games socially for quite a few years in that period of my life, and then sort of following that, I've actually dipped back into sort of the adventure space with things like Uncharted.
Nice.
I've been playing some of the reduxes of Tomb Raider, and yeah, Dark Side Detective, slight, bridge to very loose bridge to the game that we're working on as well. Yeah, so those are the ones that have influenced both me personally and also me from a gaming perspective.
Okay. And well, of course, there's always a point in our lives, including mine, when we realize that playing games is fun, but what about making them? Like, wouldn't that be fun too? So when did you guys realize that you wanted to make games? Was it like an epiphany for you guys? Was it like a sudden light bulb moment or something?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of it was I didn't really ever think you could make games. And I know this is a classic theme. I didn't really know that was a job, and I yeah. So I basically accidentally got into it. So I used to work in the olden days in for like in advertising. So and one of my main clients was Xbox, and
Right. Okay.
totally accidental. But I was just given the Xbox account, and I ended up working on it, and we ended up creating a lot of like ARGs, or alternate reality games. And I got really interested in thinking about, again, games from a slightly different perspective. And I felt really excited about games that had different formats in particular. And eventually I made the leap out of advertising, where actually I basically want to devote my working life to exploring new formats of games. And I think it was really, then there were things coming out like Her Story around that time that I think really helped me conceptualize the kind of games that I wanted to make. I think Her Story in particular, which is a player-directed game with ambiguity and open-endedness, like I thought was a really exciting premise, and even though it's kind of like weird and flawed in lots of ways, the philosophy of it I found like deeply inspiring. Yeah, probably always been trying to emulate that.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And yeah, I mean, I'm kind of, before we hand it over to Ben, I kind of felt the same way recently, where one of my clients, I'm not working in advertising, but I'm working in comms for a social media agency for my day job, and one of my clients is a gaming publisher, an indie publisher. So
Okay.
that has kind of rekindled again my will to try and make small games here and there, just as a hobby, and not like commercially yet, but who knows, maybe one day. So yeah, I do see myself in what you say, Tom. It's always interesting to be in touch with those people who are making the games. That kind of awakens something in you if you've always had that kind of desire, which is interesting. And what about you, Ben?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, first time I made a game was at uni, but for me that was 15 plus years ago. So this was you didn't it was a computer science degree. It wasn't a games related degree. You didn't really have, to my knowledge, gaming taught at university, and I didn't really see it as a like career path to go into from uni at the time. But making a game really to prove out a new technology, which was Java 3D, 3D in Java,
Okay.
was a lot of fun. And that, I think, gave me planted that seed. And I wanted to scratch that itch, like
Okay.
grow that seed. But I went into, I guess a more standard career for computer scientists at the time. And over that period, got to play with some of the early Oculus stuff and tinker with VR, but never really got to make a game or work in the games industry per se. And it was, and so it's fast forwarding to like the pandemic or a bit before the pandemic, really. I was working with a technology called conversational AI, which is sort of chatbots and ability to like have conversations with computers and stuff, and starting to think like this is the opportunity to do something really cool in gaming, and sort of translate everything I'd learned in the enterprise sector and start to make it fun effectively. Um, yeah, and I'm sure we get a chance to chat about it, but I started creating a game,
Mm-hmm.
Baseball Alpha, about escaping Earth, and it was a conversational game,
Okay.
and that kind of led to what did very much lead to where Tom and I are now, and us meeting, etc. So
All right.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's then a perfect segue into my next question. I think, well, actually, even before we talk about that meet, how did you guys come together? Like, what brought to the birth of Meaning Machine?
I think one thing we should say before we get into that is that
Yes.
both Ben and I have been working in a space of natural language AI for
Okay.
around 7 years in the space of gaming. But what's really interesting is that was not necessarily large language models. That's become large
Okay.
language models, but actually, as a broad field, we were both in slightly different spaces. So we were using, sort of NLP, natural language processing, and we were using various different other ways to simulate conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was era where everyone was very interested in large language models, but they actually weren't very good at delivering content that felt exciting or interesting or rich or meaningful. So we started doing this whole like AI conversation thing
Uh-huh.
before the AI conversation thing became what it is
Yeah.
now, right? Um,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, so that was just a bit of caveat of like,
Pioneering. No. That's absolutely super
yeah.
interesting.
I mean, Ben's touched on how it started from his side, but from my
Yeah.
side, so when I left, I think it's in 2017 or something like that, go
Mm-hmm.
pursue my own game studio and all that. I made a game called Unknown Number, which is a voice controlled game. And the whole purpose of it was like, I want to see how to make conversation and voice control fun. And I want to create a new genre around it called the first person talker. Because it really felt like this conversation, this technology was coming in. We were right at the birth of it, but no one had written the creative rule book about how to make good, fun games in the space. And I was really driven to try and find that fun, that the key to fun in using this technology. And so Unknown Number came out. It did pretty well from a critical perspective. I got to talk about it at GDC and, sort of position myself as like one of the guys doing this. But then I also met one of the other guys doing this, who is Ben. And Ben, as Ben mentioned, was his own game, which is remarkably similar to Unknown Number in some ways. It's a conversational game that you're trying to do some sort of heist. And we really realized there was an opportunity for a supergroup to be formed here. I have a whole load of experimental game design learnings and premises and various different approaches to it, whereas Ben really had this really solid technological bedding and foundation for the next generation of the first person talker, which is what we're working on together.
I think that's a great summary. I mean, just to add for me, I was trying to figure out how to make that transition into the games industry at the time. This is like 3 or 4 years ago. I'd maybe been prototyping for a couple of years, and it was an intro from I was kind of on a course which was sort of breaking into games and bridging the gap between tech and games and stuff, and that led to an intro to Tom. It led to hours of conversation and learning about what each other were doing, and ultimately, that affinity just was there in the first day I think we met, and obviously now we're 2.5, 3 years down the road.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting and wholesome stories in a lot of ways too. And the fact that you guys basically connected based on your experience, but also shared interests in terms of the kind of creative work that you like to do. That is absolutely incredible. That's usually where the best studios are made. And I can tell that you guys are doing something that has very clear direction, a very clear sense of direction as well, which is super, super interesting. So yeah, well, I think I'm interested to know, like, working on a game in itself is an interesting challenge, but I can't imagine adding a large language model to the mix. So I think now we can finally reveal what Dead Meat is all about and the underlying technology underneath and just fueling the whole thing, driving the whole thing. So yeah, do you guys want to talk a little bit about that? And also, how the hell are you handling using a large language model for the game?
I mean, so Dead Meat is the next first person talker. So it's the second ever first person talker after Unknown Number, but it uses a fundamentally different technology, which is very much what Ben has been the influential partner in making that happen. Which is we essentially use large language models, which is what most people will have come into contact with via ChatGPT or whatever, or Grok, or insert whatever it is, and we use large language models to deliver a interrogation game where you can ask the suspect anything and have a totally open, free-form conversation with murder suspects to try and find out the truth of what happened. But it is super unique in the sense that we have basically declared death to dialogue trees. We have banished the dialogue tree, and instead we have trained a system which delivers an emergent gameplay experience and feels much more like, I don't know, a game of Dungeons and Dragons where you, the player, can bring your own creativity to it, than say, I don't know, a game where you're trying to navigate through a set of gates to get to an objective.
Yeah, and that is pretty much the experience that I had when playing the demo, and I do second that. It does feel like that. It feels very, very open. You can literally go down any route and try to solve mysteries and those conversational puzzles in any way you want. But yeah, over to you, Ben.
Yeah, well, I think and that was one of our biggest challenges, right? Is to create something that's a fun experience and that's guided and that feels like a game, but also has that freedom and leverages technology without that technology being feeling too repetitive or too transparent in the game. And I think we've worked on, at least a handful of key problems over the last sort of 12 months or so to bring the kind of, you asked originally about, how do you run a game using an LLM? Well, just using a raw LLM is great, and I'm sure most of your listeners and all of us have had experience of various ones,
Of course.
but there's certainly been numerous challenges to sort of try and get them under
Tweaking it,
control
yeah.
and use them in a fun way and deliver the kind of experience that we've got in Dead Meat.
Well, I was just going to say that the thing to jump in is one of our biggest challenges is how do we deliver something that feels that is delivered by human authors, right? Is a created piece by us who have a vision for a game, have a story we want to tell. How do we use the technology to tell that story? And I think that in a way is where the most exciting stuff about a lot of the technology that Ben's been working on is that it really allows human writers, so myself and the rest of the writing team, to create really deep stories and characters that we're in love with and can't wait to share with people, and then actually see them come to life in a way that it's literally like breathing life into something, because you can define all these things, but then there's this amazing moment where I've watched hundreds of hours of people playing Dead Meat. I pretty much wrote the character, and yet she still surprises me. She still keeps me interested. It's still, very exciting. And that's just the demo.
I think that's really interesting. And actually, something that I wanted to ask you is if there was a particular development challenge that left a mark on you. But I think here the challenge is much wider than development. It is about, I like what you said about creating something that is made with AI but still feels human, something that has the human touch. And I think that is a huge challenge in itself. So, like, what have you learned on the process? Is there something you want to share with other developers, and any big learnings, so to speak?
I've got one really quick one, and then I'm sure you got one, which is, so people say that AI will kill writers, and we think that Dead Meat proves the exact opposite. Dead Meat is only good because of the huge amount of handwritten content that's gone into it. And, like, in the end, AI is always a form of mimicry, right? So you basically need to give it high quality, hand-authored, handwritten dialogue, story, meaningful things that you as a writer are bringing to it. And there's no such thing as this AI that is just good. It's going to deliver something that's good. It always is something that has to be based on something that humans have created. And while that's very controversial, it's not controversial if you make sure that the AI is based on the content that you created. And that's the big difference is,
I mean, in your case, AI has created a job, so to speak, around a team. So it hasn't taken over their role. It's just a little bit more specialized in working with AI. And that's exactly like my personal stance for anyone listening. My personal stance on AI is exactly the same. Like, I use language models. I use maybe ChatGPT the most, but I use them on my day job as well, not copying and pasting the output as it is, but as an assistant. And I think the best way to see it is a definition that someone used once. It's like having 500 interns working for you at the same time, but they're still interns, and you still have to check their work, and you still have to make sure that that it aligns to your standards. So your technical and also specialist expertise still has a role in that kind of workflow. You still have a role to play, and maybe AI augments your job and allows you to do even more creative things, but it doesn't replace what you do entirely. And I think that's where the nut, the core of the conversation is. And I'm sure you will agree with that, Ben, as well. So I'll leave the word to you.
Definitely.
To answer the question too.
If you've been in our team for the last 12 months, you'd realise what AI can't do, and how much you have to wrangle it, and how much effort has gone into, leveraging. We're using AI to benefit the game, but the game, it's not AI controlled, AI driven. It's human driven, and it's built in a way that you would build this kind of game, regardless of the AI component. I think actually the thing that Tom mentioned as as the writers and the AI and the need for writers to drive and control, that. That has actually been both the challenge, one of the biggest challenges of the project, but also one of the biggest successes so far. Right, is to create like tooling, create a process, mix the standard ways of writing scripts and backstories and characters with this kind of new supplementary delivery mechanism that we've now got in games, which is, you know, generative AI in dialogue. And of course, there's generative AI imagery, and there's other applications of AI as well. So just quickly, I think just bringing together those different sides of the coin, if you like, to deliver the experience has been one of the biggest challenges.
One of the things we say is we say don't use AI to create content. Use AI to deliver content you have created. One of our watchwords internally. And you know, even though it's a slight, it's only a slight reframing, the actual implications are super radical, because it basically helps, us understand a really positive, exciting future for AI rather than a scary, very negative, very dystopian future for AI. And I think we're very much the champions of the creative opportunity and the creative possibilities, and very much enemies to all talk of automation and cost cutting and all the grim stuff. Our other mantra is like fuck tech bros, right? Like we hate tech bros probably more than anyone who comes to us thinking that we're tech bros, right?
Tech and crypto bros, yeah. Well, of course, I suppose that's an assumption that you have to face all the time. But like, as a writer, I can assure you, listeners who are out there, you can write incredible stories about AI taking over the world. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. But yeah, so like that's actually a question that I didn't think about. But you guys must be facing that kind of assumption all the time, like people coming to you and being like, oh yeah, no, you're using AI, that's crap. But actually what you're doing here is something really fresh, really innovative, that's putting AI in the hands of actual writers and still delivering some kind of a creative work that has their soul poured into it. So how do you challenge that, basically?
Yeah. I mean, I think from my perspective, like, we really try and share what we're doing, how we're working, our values. Tom, maybe you want to talk a bit on the creative side, but yeah, from the technical point of view, the system that we've built, we thought very hard about how we ensure it's ethical and considerate, and it takes into account some of the challenges with adopting new technology. We're proud to be doing that and championing that and talking about it. So, we go to events, we open, lift the lid on what we're doing, and all of that is hopefully evident through playing the game and coming and meeting us and chatting to us.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that's the thing is, how do we fight the tech bros? I think that we're really lucky in that Dead Meat is a fun game, right? So the way the conversation goes is people go, you're using AI is bad. We go, yep, cool, understand, agree with all your points. Like, we actually like believe in them ourselves, but play Dead Meat, and people will sit and play Dead Meat, and it will actually help them at least nuance that conversation and go, okay,
nice,
there is a legitimate way to use it. There is a way that can be author-led and creatively exciting. And I think increasingly we're seeing, fundamentally, we're game makers. We have been making experimental games, for a long time, way before any of these crypto bros jumped on AI as a thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the point. Is they go, we can make a lot of money because this technology is really powerful, and we're going, we can make some really cool shit.
Yeah, that's the whole difference, I guess, when it comes to the tech bros and such. They're all money oriented most of the times, but you guys are creating something creative, and it's great actually that you're adding nuance to the AI conversation. Like, people come to you and say, oh yeah, AI is bad, and I agree myself. I'm sure any kind of point they bring to you, I would agree too, like all the transparency, privacy, data scraping and whatnot. I agree totally. But it can be used as a tool to create something that will change the conversation and at least leave people with something that will remember for a long time. I think you guys are doing something really pioneering there and really fresh, and it's great to see it to see it happening. And I guess once Dead Meat comes out, it will be an interesting case study for how to use AI in games. And I hope that you guys get a lot of coverage for that, because your story needs to be heard more. And to just bring AI under a more positive light that doesn't have anything to do with money necessarily.
Yeah, so we want our ambition is to basically inspire other people like us, other developers, to basically seize control of the conversation. So we basically, we see our work as a call to arms to all creative people to step forward, seize AI, grab it, and show how central creative people are to making good things with AI. And this vision that the tech bros are spinning of there is a humanless, creativeless future is us, yes. But if we don't step forward and if we don't prove the centrality of creative people every step of the way, there is a danger that we'll be written out of the narrative by by the powers that be, right?
Yeah.
and I think that's terrible news for us, but it's terrible news for players as well.
The dystopian tech bros, they will step in actually, and our worst fears will materialize. Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I suppose what you guys are doing then is something that could be somewhat called, or at least defined in a way as human-centric AI, or something like that, which sounds like it sounds like they're two polar opposites, but in your case, it is happening, and I think it's really interesting. So yeah, well, before we had our little technical hiccup, I was about to ask you after this question, the core question of the show. And it's something that I always love asking everybody. And if you listen to any episode of the Indie Diarist, I always say that it is, why are you guys game developers? What drives you forward?
Do you want to start with that, Ben?
Yeah. I think for me, it's rooted in wanting to do something fun with tech. So I've got a tech brain, but I want to be having fun. I want to be creating joy. I want to be making good. And that's what drives me. On the second level, it's finally being able to create the experiences, the kinds of experiences I love to enjoy for years as a child, a teenager. It's being on that other side of the table and actually being able to do that.
Yeah. And that's really lovely and noble, and it's not something I've heard once. A lot of people do feel that way when it comes to game development. Others feel like it's the one thing that brings together everything that I've always loved: art, music, all of that, and that is always really refreshing to hear. But Tom, I guess now is your turn, and now I'm really curious to hear about the concept of game design as a rebellious process or something. I suppose that has to do with the answer to this question. So over to you.
Well, I think for me, video games are one of the only spaces left in culture where there is a true frontier. Right. Genuinely a space where the question of what good looks like hasn't even begun to be comprehensively answered. And it's like movies. There are so many amazing movies. I actually feel sorry for movie makers at this point. I feel sorry for how the hell are you meant to make a movie? Same with music. Like music, I feel sorry for people making music. I love these things. I still think they're really interesting. There's obviously these cultural moments that you can be part of, and it's all wonderful. But from a pure creative experimentation point of view, video games are the only place where no one can definitively say we have comprehensively explored this space. And I think that's what really drew me to it. Is I am driven to try and be part of defining, shaking up, kicking the games industry, going, what, let's try and break out of all the molds and realize that we're just at the beginning of the journey. And if we look up from all the genres we have and all the kind of established ways of playing, the opportunities to make interesting and exciting and novel and revolutionary gameplay experiences are so vast, but we're not seeing them. And so I'm really excited by this kind of like this, trying to play this like energizer position of being like, do you have any idea how open the opportunity is? Like, and it just amazes me. There are so many game developers making the same games again and again and again and again. I love Elden Ring as much as the next person. I really do love Elden Ring. But like, I think it's there needs to be more of a gang of people who are really excited by not just the cutting edge of like what's technically possible, but also like just asking what is a game, what could a game be, and really just pushing that conversation forward aggressively and with like serious passion. So that's been my agenda, and it is that frontier space that is the reason I'm in games and not in any other medium.
Well, I think that's a beautiful answer there, and I totally agree with every single word you said. It's interesting, like all of these other branches of entertainment, like music and movies and such, they're creating like I think they're working in niches now, and very very specific niches. Like you may find that singer or that author or that filmmaker that you really like, and you tend to follow those things, or you tend to follow, you know, maybe the big cultural moments, like I don't know, maybe the next Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I'm so glad it's done in the way it used to be. And I lost all interest in it. But basically, yeah, that's how I see things happening right now. There are these pockets of communities, and they all interact with each other somehow because they share the same passion, but they share the same passion in a lot of different ways. In games, there are still pockets of communities, but there's just still so much to explore. And I think you have a point there, which is really interesting. And the opposite of the question that I asked you guys would be, what do you think drives you backwards instead? Like, what's your biggest struggle, especially as an indie developer?
Money.
Oh yeah. So you are like the tech bros after all. No,
like, I think the hardest thing is, you know, right now it's really hard to make, you know, long-term business based in innovative experimental work, and you know, and it's a really important thing that we ensure that this space gets the kind of funding that other areas do to push forward that kind of work. I mean, you know, in visual arts, there's no end of funding to help people at the frontier of it, even though that frontier is fairly limited at this point. Whereas I think, you know, there needs to be that perspective brought to video games as well, to ensure that there is. Yeah, I'll give you an example. You know, Cryptmaster is an amazing game, and the developers of Cryptmaster have been like, this is, you know, we've worked on a really great game, but I think next time maybe we should just do something a bit more expected so we sell more copies. And there's something about the market dynamic that is really pushing us all into this sea of same. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is that this tension between the purchase cycle of I'll get the same thing again but a bit different, versus actually the kind of creative imperative, which is to pushing that envelope. And how we resolve that tension, I don't know, but we're trying to be part of that story.
Okay. Yeah. I think you raised some really excellent points there. Well, guys, we are nearly done with the episode. I just have 2 more questions for you guys, which should be fun, just to wrap things up. But what can I say? The thing is, I was expecting to talk about Dead Meat and the innovation behind Dead Meat, but we ended up talking about human-centric AI, creativity, the unexplored frontiers in gaming. I think this is a beautiful episode, and we just naturally discuss all of these things, and all things that I love very, very deeply. So let's wrap it up with 2 hopefully fun questions to you. One of them will be super deep. The other one might be a little bit more lighthearted. Imagine writing a letter or a note to yourself, but well, in your case, Tom, I think back in, was it 2017 that you left advertising? What would you say? And in your case, Ben, you pick a date, but maybe 10 years younger or something like that.
I think it would try and convey believe in yourself. Go for it. Don't think too much. Try, put things out there, make it happen.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, mine would be something similar. I think probably the most valuable piece of advice I ever got given right at the beginning was, the only difference between being a game maker and not a game maker is that a game maker makes games. And I think, like, the meaning of that, of like, you actually just need to do it, and you just need to ship it. And I think that, like, and I would write that to myself, and I would, you know, read that every day, especially Unknown Number, my first game. It was a bloody birthing process. It was hard. I thought, at points I was like, am I totally deluded? Is this really bad? and I'm just really glad. I'm really glad that I stuck with it. I'm really glad that I followed the journey forward, because there were times I was going, I've lost it. I don't, this is not a good idea. No one wants this. Why am I wasting my time with this? But it's all of that stuff that led me to meeting Ben, has led to Dead Meat, has led to, I think, you know, I hopefully I speak for both of us, which is the most exciting moments in our career that I've ever had. And, you know, all I have is full of joy and excitement for the future, but it would not have been possible without that blood and sweat and tears and, why am I in my bedroom trying to make this damn thing when there's no audience for it? And yeah.
But you never know where that next project is going to take you, and what are you going to learn from it. So I think you said something valuable there. Everything that you did there led you to meeting Ben and to Dead Meat, and who knows to what else. So Dead Meat will probably lead you to something else, both of you. And I hope that thing is super positive and it happens for both. So yeah. And the last question I have for you is a little bit more fun. If you guys had unlimited budget and time, so resources, what game would you make? And I think I know the answer to this one, but I want to hear it from you.
What do you think, Ben? Dead Meat.
It's really putting me on the spot. I mean, you never think in that mode, to be honest, when you're running the studio. Yeah, I mean, I think in truth, I'd probably pursue something that connected Dead Meat to maybe a kind of huge, a really big audience, and created this really like social world that people could actually spend time in, that projected a lot of the creative aspects of Dead Meat that we've been speaking about in terms of like creating your own journey and following that. So I would go for sort of a rich, fun. I mean, if we're speaking just in games and we're speaking primarily in the direction we're going, that would be.
Well,
I'd probably also try and license the IP to make my own Indiana Jones games, but
that might be a good idea. Well, I'll throw you a little possible nugget of inspiration there. Imagine a Disco Elysium with the Dead Meat technology. Like, I think that would be absolutely incredible. But yeah, and Tom, I think you already replied, but you said Dead Meat. Well, I think.
Yeah, I think that we always talk about. So there's two things. So when I first started the whole third person talker thing, I always had a joke, which is like, well, I'm really aiming for GTA, the first person talker, which is basically what Ben said, which is connecting the Dead Meat experience, but then putting it in a much bigger world. So you have lots of these agents doing it. But I think, fast forward 6-7 years or whatever it is, I think obviously Baldur's Gate 3 or Baldur's Gate 4 is a really interesting challenge to explore. I think we're really interested in, the reason is because that's a game that is connected with so many people because of the richness of the characters and the depth of the dialogue. And so it's the ultimate challenge for us to try and achieve something like that. But my actual answer is probably, if I had unlimited budgets, what I would do is I would set up 5 teams, and I would give us each 18 months, and we would each make a very small, very cool, very polished experimental game using this technology. Different iterations of what a first-person talker could be.
Very, very cool answer. Yeah, that would be an interesting challenge, and you know what? You answered exactly like I thought you would. There are always two kinds of people that come onto this podcast. One wants to do an MMO, and the other one wants to do the same thing they're doing but better and larger. And I thought you guys would be the latter kind, and I can see that. Like, if you just had unlimited resources, we would just do Dead Meat but bigger. Basically, and experiment with the kind of technology that you have now, which really speaks volumes to the kind of path that you're on and the fact that you're probably on the right track to doing something really great. So, well, that is a wrap up on this episode, and it's time for some parting words, guys. Thank you so much for coming onto the show. It's been such a beautiful episode, as I mentioned, one that I will probably cherish for a long time, and I can't wait for this one to be live. And also maybe potentially meet you again at EGX, this time possibly both of you. Time for some parting words now. So where can other people find you? And if they do, what is the best way to support you?
Where can you find us? Well, we're on Steam. Dead Meat is on Steam. We're also on social media. But I think, the actual truth is we're here to find collaborators, people who want to work with us and push this revolution forward. So email us, like literally email us, info@meaningmachine.games. This is a podcast for developers. We want to create a collective of developers exploring the space. So info@meaningmachine.games. I think, like come join us, come be like the punks in this space, and like we can define some really awesome stuff together.
I think that is lovely, and I think it's the first time someone has advertised on this show, but I will allow it because it was beautiful. Okay, well, thank you guys, and best of luck with Dead Meat. I'm sure it's going to be amazing.
Cool, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Sam.
And here we go, friends. That's a wrap on another episode of the Indie Diaries podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to Tom and Ben from Meaning Machine. You guys are doing an amazing thing, and I love discussing everything creativity, AI, human-centric creativity and AI. All of these things with you. I think we had one of the most beautiful conversations on the show ever, and I will treasure it for a very long time. So best of luck with that meet. I can't wait for it to be out, and I will probably bring it to the Indie Diaries Discord, not Discord, to the Indie Diaries YouTube channel for my listeners and viewers to enjoy. And about that, actually, well, since I mentioned Discord, you guys can join the Discord channel and Discord server for the Indie Diaries. You can go to theindiediaries.com, where you'll find a lot of links, including links to Twitter, Threads, all the social media, YouTube channel, Patreon, and such. Especially the YouTube channel is worth watching these days, because I've started a new series called Blank Pages, where I play demos from the guests of the show, and I'm also planning to bring some playthroughs and such for the latest indie games, some trending games and such. So just keep an eye on the Indie Diaries YouTube channel, because it's going to get very exciting over the next few months. Other than that, what I want to remind you is that the Indie Diaries is an entirely listener-supported show. And for that reason, if you do want to support the show in any way, you can go to patreon.com/theindiediarist, check out all the tiers that start from £1.25 per month, and you will gain access to episodes in advance, video versions of each episode, and a lot more depending on the tier that you subscribe for. And if you are an indie game developer yourself, please get in touch, because I would love to tell your story to the world. So I'll speak to you in the next episode of the Indie Diarist.